This video is sponsored by Gato Audio of Denmark, makers of quality audiophile amplifiers, network players, sources and loudspeakers. Sometimes when you review stuff, it's actually inferior to what you own yourself, but not in this case. And this is a bit of a hedonistic review for me because about 6 or 7 years ago, I had tried some Totem Hawk speakers, which I actually nearly bought. So this review of these Bison towers is one that I wanted to try for my own reasons. And because I like this small two-way floor stander type speaker. So these Totem Bison towers retail for 3,000 Canadian dollars, around 2,250 US dollars, in the UK 3,295 and in Europe 3,399 euros, and they form part of a series of 4 Bison speakers, including these, the twin tower, the monitor and also a center channel speaker. I'm not going into too much detail about the technical aspects of these speakers because I've already given Totem airtime in a previous video I did with Vince, their head. This video I'm confining it to my impressions on them, their sound quality and comparisons to other speakers, particularly PMC, which I have quite a bit of knowledge about. But talking about the main aspects of the design, these speakers are in some respects quite conventional, two-way rear ported design with a 5¼ inch mid-bass unit that's made out of paper and fiberglass, and then a 33mm soft dome tweeter that is activated by neodymium magnets. The cabinets that you can get in a white oak, satin white or black ash feature a lock mitered construction in difference to V-groove panel construction, and this is to improve the surface area of the joints, which Totems say improves cabinet rigidity and also prevents failure of glue joints over many years, so you can have your speakers last a lot longer. But I love Totem speakers for their build quality because these are amongst the best I've ever tried on this channel, and you notice these chamfered edges at certain points around the cabinets. You don't have veneer panels abutting up against each other with sharp edges that are very thin pieces of veneer that can fail over a number of years of handling. These cabinets on these Totems are going to look the same in many years to come. There are these twin binding posts that are positioned about a third way down from the top, obviously twin so you can bi-amp or bi-wire, and they're positioned here in difference to being at floor level so you can run cables along the floor for design considerations that Vince mentions. The other thing you'll notice about the design is these cone-shaped feet. When you actually knock them, feel like they're made out of a nice aluminium, but they're actually a very, very high density grade plastic that appears like metal, so there's no plasticky nature to them, of a material called Delrin. The feet, which are called decoupling claws, are designed to work flush with the floor without spikes to break up standing waves. And the feet work with the cabinets to do that, hence why spikes aren't actually needed. I understand it that the feet are cone shaped to dissipate the energy that exists between the floors and the cabinets as the energy rises up the speakers. And these speakers aren't hard to drive to, with an 8 ohm nominal impedance and being 88 dB sensitive. And just talking about the frequency response too, pretty decent for speakers of these size, 33 Hz to 30 kHz. Coming on to talk about sound quality, the first thing I noticed on trying these Totem Bison towers is that they fill a room with music and sound, even considering their small diminutive size. We're talking about a speaker that is under a metre tall, in fact only 849 millimetres to be more precise and specific. These speakers are a bit like some from a brand called Spender, their A4s that I once heard at a hi-fi show. Everybody was just coming out thinking, how can a speaker that size produce that amount of sound? I think the Spenders are actually a little bit smaller too. Bass is deep and extended, but there is a way that they integrate the bass and the treble so brilliantly, with so much refinement, neutrality and finesse, that they're the types of speakers that anybody would like and find pleasing. I've been trying a new artist for me whilst I've been trying these Bison speakers called Felix Laband. He's available on Tidal, and it's the sort of electronica music that people like at audiophile hi-fi shows. Very dynamic music, shifting between the speakers very fast, with lots of percussive instruments and sounds, and also very sampled type music. Check out the tracks called Righteous Red Berets, Falling Off a Horse, and then there's another one called Miss Teardrop. Those are the standout tracks for me so far. Check that artist out because he will, I'm sure, please a lot of people on this channel. Another thing that I wrote down as a standout trait is that the way that they deal with spatial cues very realistically and very precisely. So that's the way that musical sounds or instruments are separated and are placed within the soundstage, whether that's width-wise, depth-wise, height-wise. And relevant to my own speakers, the PMC 25-23s, I felt these Totems were better at conveying the level of decay in instruments and sounds, and also the precise way that they deal with those little percussive inflections in a lot of electronic music. The way the treble is very realistic. I was trying a bit of Yellow's Star Breath track in this respect. These speakers also create a sense of atmospherics very well, in the sense of a long decaying bass when it's required in the music, and a decrescendo or diminuendo type way. There is that decaying nature of bass, but in the confines of a big sound stage. I'm not talking about languid, sloppy or undynamic bass, but bass that tails off in a way that you'd consider to be really realistic of instruments and music. This decaying nature of the bass is contextualized with it being a very extended bass, as I said, very natural. There is also too a depth, width and height to the soundstage that's so well placed and accurate that you often find yourself looking to the sides when previously unheard of nuances in music that might not be apparent on other speakers, certainly with my own 25-23s, come out and pop out in the music. It surprises you sometimes, and you feel like that these nuances and sounds in the music are actually coming from behind you, and that is a test of a really good speaker. Timbrally, that old school Korg synthesizer sound of a type like in the track Hymn by Vangelis, and the way that you can pull out all those raspy strands in that synthesizer, and the way that the bass tone sits lovely in an underlying way to those strands above, is so pleasing with these Totem speakers, and way more defined and accurate than my now obsolete PMC 25-23s. Also better in that respect than the current 25-23i's that I reviewed a year or two back. They cost £4,575. These Totems don't have it over those PMCs I mentioned for sheer rawness in scale, speed and delivery, but they do have it over those PMCs for mid-bass treble integration, timbral accuracy and overall refinement. And if we have to compare again in relation to treble, the PMCs, relatively speaking, and in small terms I'm talking about, have a harder, more brittle treble. Another competitor on price in Canada and the US is PMC's new Prodigy 5 speakers, which I actually reviewed quite recently. And if you move these Totems a decent distance from walls, I found that they are actually more dynamic with bass than the PMCs are with their front ported, limited boundary effect type front transmission line ports. And that's saying something, considering that PMCs are known for being the class leader or one of the class leaders in terms of bass speed and dynamics. The Prodigy 5's bass is a bit overblown and bloated compared to these Bison speakers when moving them away from walls as well. And also I found that the resolution isn't up there with the Bison towers, and the mid-range is a little bit thin and it sits further back in the soundstage. Also, soundstage is lesser overall with the Prodigy 5s. I just think that people, if they're buying in the US or Canada, are going to prefer these Totem Bison towers for all the reasons that I mentioned. The Prodigy 5s, if you're buying them in the UK, are obviously going to be cheaper. If you bought the Totem Bison towers and they're about £1,000 more, I think you're going to probably be thinking they are the better speakers in UK and Europe as well. If it were my money, I would have these Totem Bison towers over the Prodigy 5s. And that says something when I love my own 25-23 PMCs and I've been a big PMC customer myself. I think that against the 25-23i speakers, which cost a lot more money, these Totems represent better value for money, definitely. And it may be sort of horses for courses on which is the better speaker and which is more preferred. You've got the PMCs for speed, agility and dynamics, and then the Totems for natural qualities, resolution, timbral information and mid-bass integration. But you'd be a fool if you decided to discount these Totems on the basis that they cost a lot less than those PMCs, because these Totems may get you more of what you want. And I personally think they're equally as impressive as the 25-23i's. So far as matching to amplifiers, which we haven't talked about in terms of like tonal characteristics, you want to match them with amplifiers that are neutral or maybe just slightly forward. Don't match them with forward amplifiers. Obviously, for a neutral speaker, that perhaps goes without saying, but I found that matching them with my Hagel H390, great for grip, drive and power and guts. And equally, when I changed over to this Gato Audio Amp 150AE that I still have on loan, a little bit more better transiently dynamic in the mid bass and a little bit more resolution, but equally as impressive. You don't want to be pairing these speakers with amplifiers that don't have guts and power, because they like current. I wouldn't be pairing these speakers to amps like the Name Super 83 that I tried a while back. I think that it's a very fluidly dynamic amp in terms of resolution, and I think with a pairing to these Totem Bison towers, an amp like that would bring too much life to instruments like cymbals with too much sparkle and twang to them, if that makes sense. I can't recommend these speakers enough, really. Obviously they come from a well-regarded speaker firm, from a designer who is very well reputed. So on top of my own experiences, they come extremely recommended. And if I did badge awards, I'd give them a knockout 5-star outstanding applause award against the Prodigy 5s from PMC. And you have to compare to know. Thanks very much for watching and have a very, very good Christmas.